So we begin our discussion of Parshat Ki Tetze, this parsha that's chock full of mitzvot, with the question of the Jewish value of safety. And it comes up one particular mitzvah, a makeh or a fence or parapet, and let's take a look at that mitzvah. So here we go. So, in general society, we like to talk about different types of values, and we sometimes leave it there. In other words, safety is a big value in Judaism or in general society. But where the Torah is miyasem, it brings to application. I just did a video the other day on the notion of loving your neighbor as yourself, brought to specific mitzvot. There are particular ways in which we can act on this broad banner called love your neighbor as yourself. So too when it comes to safety. We're going to see that there are a number of ways where the Torah applies, brings down to earth the idea of Jewish safety in general, and it brings it down to a very practical realm. So let's take a look. How does the Torah reach in deep to make sure that safety is a priority and a value, not just in some general sense, but in very specific ways? So we have the pasuk in our parsha, one pasuk, which is part of a whole world of Torah and safety. When you build a new home, make for yourself a fence around your roof. It's a strange word, makeh. Maybe it means akka from the Aramaic. You can call akka. God should save us from all akka, from all suffering. So it's something to prevent suffering, people from falling off. Don't put blood in your house. Such that if a person falls off, would fall off. The one who falls will fall. You don't want to have that on your record. Don't put the blood in your house. Don't do that. Now notice, is it about me or is it about my home? About society? So notice how it says the blood will be not on your hands, it'll be in your house. So it's kind of an interesting formulation. Let's think about that. The Midrash says, we always want to start there because the Sifrei is the basic Midrash on Devarim and Bamidbar for that matter. Sifrei, that's the two books. You should make for yourself a fence, parapet for your roof. I only know it says roof. What about on a well? Do I need to put a fence around a well, around a big pit in the ground, a big cave, or other crevices? There's a general principle here. It's not just the detail. In other words, we need the detail. Like, hey, why don't you put a fence around your roof? If it's a flat roof and people can walk on it, why don't you put a fence up there? And then even once we know the specific idea, let's go back to the general idea. You don't want to have any blood on your hands. So that would be anything. So why does it say roof? Because it doesn't apply to a ramp. A ramp somehow is included. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but there are some things that are excluded. So it gives you a good idea of where to, yes, put safety measures for safety, and where sometimes it's not necessary. Don't put blood in your home. What does that mean? So let's look in the translations. When you start a discussion, you want to know what's the official translation of the New York Yankees when you get to it. So the Onkelos is one of the famous and most official translations. Lo tishavei chovat ketol beitach. Don't put the obligation of death in your house. You don't want to get to a point where you're obligated for death. Of course, no one's going to convict me of murder if someone decides to walk on my roof and they don't watch where they're going and they fall off. No one's going to convict me of murder. But I don't want to have that obligation. So maybe it's about my personal thing. I don't want to have the obligation on me, but on my house. The Neo-50 says, it doesn't just say the obligation of death, but the obligation not to spill blood, innocent blood, in my house. In other words, whoever falls off is relatively innocent. I mean, what did he do wrong? He's on the roof. He happens to fall off. So don't put innocent blood. It's interesting to think about all the, particularly Mexican and other people who put on roofs in our neighborhood. What kind of protections they have, what kind of insurance, what kind of safety. It's an interesting question. The Gemara in Ketubot expands this law because we can't just be about roofs. I mean, there's got to be other dangerous things. So we say, all right, so there are pits, there are other things you could fall into instead of falling off of. But Rab Nassan one of the great rabbis in the Talmud. He's so great, he was greater than Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. He knew more than Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. But he got himself in trouble, and it's not mentioned as much in the Mishnah itself. But anyway, Minayin shlo yigadel Adam kelev rab toch beito. How do you know that you shouldn't raise a bad dog? Now, I know many of you in the South have dogs, and that's fine. But if it's a bad dog, if it's a dog that's very dangerous and really could cause danger to others, you shouldn't raise that kind of dog. And we can debate whether, if he's trained to attack enemies, but he's, if you keep him in control, we can argue about that. But certainly one who's uncontrollable should not raise such a dog. You shouldn't have a shaky ladder. You say, well, I know how to go on the ladder. If you don't use the second rung, you only use the third rung. No. Don't have a shaky ladder. And of course, many people had ladders to get from the first floor to the second floor. Why? The general principle, aside from saying don't have a roof covering, it also says don't put blood in your family. I'm just going to mute everybody so we'll be in good shape so we can all hear each other. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, wait, is something going on? Someone here is not muting. Let's see. Oh, it could be Nachshon. There we go. Very good. Okay. Rav Yosef Bechor says, when it says don't put blood in your house, it includes all kinds of dangers, such as a bad dog or a shaky ladder. Okay, good. The Ramban, one of the great commentators, you always have to look at what he says. He says it's related to lo ta'amod al zamriach. We'll see later that he actually says it might be a new law. In other words, every law in Devarim, we have to ask ourselves a question. We know this already, right? You have all the principles from Leviticus 19. Love your neighbor as yourself. Don't stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. So we know this already. So he says, well, maybe it's the same law. And then he says, no, maybe it's a new law. But maybe it is the same law. What law would it be related to? Don't stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. In other words, if your neighbor's about to die, don't stand by. What does it mean? The Rashbam says, don't stand, just stand there. If you can save him, even by killing someone who's pursuing him. Let's say Reuven is chasing Shimon. So by killing Reuven, you could save Shimon. You got to do it. Don't stand by the blood of your neighbor. Or the Ramban says, right? The Ramban says, either it's a new law or we know this already. So it might be related to, we don't want to stand idly by. So it's interesting, offhand, it's a little different. If someone's drowning, I have to run in, I don't want to stand idly by as they're drowning. A little different than I have a roof and I'm not standing idly by it. Who says anybody's ever going to fall off there? But I'm worried that maybe once somebody's going to go up there and it's dark and they don't notice and they don't see. So I put a fence up there. So it's a little different, but Ramban says it might be based on the same idea. The Midrash and Devarim says that, you know what this mitzvah is? This mitzvah of the fence? He says, look, God says, look, I know somebody's going to fall off of here. It's destined to be. If somebody falls off your roof, probably he was meant to fall off your roof. But I'm asking you, let it not be because of you. Some people might die of COVID, God forbid. I don't want it to be because of me, right? If you want to go to Home Depot and nobody's wearing a mask, or some other place where nobody's wearing a mask, again, I'm not picking on Home Depot, just any particular place that you might see some people not wearing a mask, that's your business. But in my shul, I am not going to encourage you to do something that is dangerous. I don't want the obstacle to fall on me. Not just that I want to take responsibility, but I don't want to be responsible for someone else's death. Even if it's someone who, let's say, other people who don't want to be careful about COVID. That's their business. I don't want to have that on my responsibility. As a Jewish people, the Midrash is saying, the Jewish people, God, Ben Adam, so fair, and I made you as like prophets. You guys should be better than that. So don't let that happen because of you. So it's not just that I'm not standing idly by as someone else dies, but I don't want to be the kind of person who's somehow responsible for other people's errors and mistakes and death, God forbid. The Rabbi Barbanel says, we're not here just to stop death. We're trying to I want to keep far away that loss, that possible loss, before it even happens. So lo tamod adam riacha means if you see someone drowning, don't stand idly by. But this is saying, you got to totally prevent this possibility from even occurring. Rabbeinu Bahyay, it's also a student of the Ramban, he says we have to be careful. So the word we're warned here to guard from danger. You should guard from danger. It's not enough that you save people from danger, not to stand idly by when someone's dying, but you should be far away from it. And he relates it to a different verse. So Ramban connected it with don't stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. He compares it to guard yourself and guard your life very much. Oh, so is that another verse? What's that? Is there a verse in the Torah that says guard your life very much? What's that? So first, let's go back. What does it mean not to stand idly by? So he says, how do we know that if someone is running after you, if Reuven's running after Shimon, that I can kill Reuven in order to save Shimon? So it says, don't stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. Or how do we know that if someone is drowning in the ocean, or there's a wild animal chasing him, or there's a robber coming to get him, that you have to save him? It says, don't stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. And it also says, don't tattle. So the Torah says, what does that got to do? Don't tattle. Don't tattle, and don't stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. What does tattling have to do with standing by the blood of your neighbor? Says the Torah. That's the Rosh's son, the progenitor of the first type of code of Jewish law that was written. He says, if you hear that I said that you did something, sort of a blackmail type of thing, if you heard that I let the secret out of the bag, you'll come and kill me. And that is something I have to protect against. So don't stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. Don't tattle. It's going to lead to something else. So that's similar. We don't want to do A, which might lead to B. If you put it that way, it's a little more similar to don't put up a roof where somebody might fall off. The Rambam talks about being extra careful. The Torah is warning us not to be lazy, not to fail with the realm of hatzalat nefesh, to save one life. Don't fail to save one life. The Torah is telling us, be proactive. Don't fail to save a life by putting up a nice fence there. Whenever we see someone who's in danger of death or other kind of loss, and we could possibly save him, like someone's drowning, and we know how to swim, and we could save him, or someone's trying to kill him, and I'm strong enough I could stop the robber. Maybe I'm clever, maybe I'm strong. Then it says, don't stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. No, if you can't swim, you don't have to jump in. Oh, I have to do something. Not, if I know I can't swim, I can't go in to save someone else from drowning. Right? But the point is that that's the mitzvah of don't stand idly by. You shouldn't be lazy. In other words, it's going a little bit beyond. Of course, you have to save a life. Many states they don't have a law of Good Samaritan law. You don't have to say if someone's drowning and I know how to swim, I don't want to get involved. I might kill him by mistake. I'll choke him by mistake. I won't get involved. Let him die. Why should I be sued? So there are some states that say, look, Good Samaritan, you tried. And other states say, no, you don't have to get involved. If you let him drown, it doesn't make a difference. So the Torah says, no, you cannot let someone die. You can't be lazy about it. You can't just stand by. But notice, this is when we see a danger. But we're talking about that even there is no danger. Just as a roof, that could be a danger. So that also is a problem. The Sefer Habatim says the root of this mitzvah, if I save you, you'll save me. The whole community will be better. It's a good institution for the whole society. Getting back to our fence idea, Rabbeinu Bahyay says that we can relate this idea to the idea of guarding your life. That it's warning us to guard yourself from danger. That a person should guard from danger. Again, is that to guard your own life or is it guard other people's life? He doesn't seem to distinguish. So there are a lot of people connecting it with different things. We have Rabbeinu Bahyay is connecting it with guard your life, right? We have the Ramban is connecting it with don't stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. Which one is it? So don't stand idly by means to take action. Guard your life has to do with guarding my own life, really. Now, is there a mitzvah to guard your life? So it's commonly said that the verse is this: you should guard your life very much. Notice Rabbeinu Bahyay brings a different verse. Guard your life very much. In both cases, it says very much. My father of blessed memory liked to point out that of all the mitzvot in the Torah, this is one area where the Torah says, guard it very much. Be particularly careful. So it's one of these mitzvahs where you got to be very careful. And we'll see about that later. The only thing is, the context of the verse is not talking about saving your life. It says, guard yourself because you didn't see any image when you stood at Mount Sinai in the fire. So you have to make sure you don't start believing in some physical, corporeal God, because we know we didn't see anything at Mount Sinai. From this, Jews have a very important principle, Muslims have this as well, that God has no form. Because we stood at Sinai, we had the best vision of God we could have, the best seats in the house, and we couldn't see an image. So God doesn't have an image. It's a major principle. So that's why we have to guard ourselves. We have to guard our souls from thinking the wrong thing about God's corporeality, God's body, that God doesn't have a body. But has it ever been taken to mean that you should guard your life? So we saw some medieval rabbis who said it, but are there any earlier sources? So the Tziv says, yeah, you can put both in. Why? Because it should have said guard, but instead it said you should be guarded. It's sort of a passive form. And since it says it should be guarded, that includes guarding your body as well as your soul. The real source of this idea that guarding your life doesn't just mean to guard yourself from thinking that God has a body, but also the Gemara, that it means to guard your life. It's a Gemara in Brachot. It's a strange source. It's a story about Elijah the prophet. There was once a very pious man, and he was praying on the road. So, I'm sorry, not about Elijah, but about a Gentile, actually. So, a certain hegemon, an officer with hegemony, with power, he comes over and he says, "Hey, Jew, Shalom Aleichem," knowing full well probably that the guy was in the middle of Shemona Esrei, the Jew was praying, and the Jew doesn't interrupt during Shemona Esrei. Now, theoretically, to save his life, he should interrupt, but somehow this Jew didn't interrupt. He kept praying. He said, "Hey, Shalom Aleichem," and the Jew just kept praying till he finished his prayer. So the hegemon was, I guess, had some mercy that day. He didn't kill him yet. After the Jew finished praying, he said, "You fool, you empty person. Doesn't it say in your Torah?" Again, many Romans knew the Torah because it was very popular. The Romans were toying with Judaism, Christianity. Doesn't it say in your Torah, guard yourself very much and guard your life? Again, and it also says, so that's in Deuteronomy 4, verse 9, verse 15, and you should guard your life very much. So doesn't it say that? Diligently, take utmost care. And so in both cases it says guard it very much. Doesn't it say that? How could you put your life in danger? So the rabbi gave, the chassid, this fellow, the Jewish person, gave some sort of answer. But the point is that the hegemon claims that in the Torah it says you should watch your life, even though that verse may be talking about other things. But still, it's interpreted that way, and that's what it says. It seems no one contests that. It seems to be true that that verse, that means that you should guard your life. It's a mitzvah to guard your life, not just guard, but very much. In fact, the Rambam codifies it. The Rambam doesn't take things lightly. Rambam doesn't necessarily, you wouldn't expect him to play around. This is a legal book. But I guess the Rambam, recognizes that there are laws to be found in stories as well. And based on that, he says as follows: and kol mikshol, any obstacle, that has danger to your life, mitzvah, I say it's a positive mitzvah, lasio, to take it away. You got to be careful. You got to guard yourself from. To be very, very careful. To guard yourself very, very beautifully. It's hard to translate. Yafeh means beautiful, beautiful. You got to guard yourself tip top. You got to guard yourself very, very much. So the Rambam picks up on the Torah's expression that my father noticed, that it says guard your life very much, and he says you should guard it very, very much. Yafeh, particularly well. How do we know? He quotes the verse, guard yourself and guard your life. It doesn't quote the other verse. If you didn't remove the obstacle, and you left those obstacles, which could bring sakana, danger, you violated a positive commandment, and you also went against a negative commandment. Don't put blood in your house. So it seems that it's not so much about saving a life, it's about taking away obstacles that might lead to loss of life. In other words, we're not just interested in saving someone who's drowning or saving someone's life. We're interested in taking away obstacles that might lead to the loss of someone's life, right? So, today you might say, you should put on a mask, not because if you don't wear a mask, you're going to die, but it could lead to catching COVID, which could lead to death. You put your mask on. So it's a little different. It's an expansion of the idea of jumping in the water to save someone who's drowning. You should jump in right now. There's no one drowning, but there could be 20 years from now someone's going to stand on that roof and fall off. You have to be cognizant of it even before. Now, if you say the word obstacle, that reminds us of another mitzvah. So we've got a whole family of mitzvot. Lo tikalel chirei, don't curse someone who can't hear. That's a good prank. If someone is blind, don't put a stumbling block in front of it. A lot of people, the classic interpretation of that is, if somebody doesn't understand something, don't mess them up. You say, should I go to that restaurant? And you know that you had a terrible stomach ache when you came back out of that restaurant. So you don't say, oh, sure, go there, it's wonderful. That's not nice. You're putting in an obstacle. You say, should my son go to that college? And your son went to that college and became a drug addict. So should you tell him to go to that college? Oh, after all, you don't want to speak against the college, blah, blah, blah. So no, you have to give him good advice. Whatever the advice is, give him good advice. That's how it's classically interpreted. However, the Sforno says, an Italian rabbi, he says, I didn't do anything. I just put a big block in front of the blind guy. And then he falls over and hits his head. That's his problem. No. Even though you don't do something actively, you don't hurt him actively, you might cause damage. There's a prohibition to that. So I failed. So here I actually am told not to put something that could make him trip. And on the roof, I'm told to take away that roof that's going to make him fall down. So all these laws are ways of bringing out the Torah value of guarding life. And the whole family of mitzvot connected to this. Now, when it says guard your life, the Maharsha, one of the great commentators particularly on stories in the Talmud, he says, this verse is talking about you shouldn't forget the Torah and about you shouldn't forget, that God doesn't have a body. So who says it's talking about harming your body? So Rabbi Elyashiv says, I don't know, what's the basis? So he quotes a Gemara in Shavuos. Rabbi Elyashiv picked up a Gemara in Shavuos, which says, anyone who curses himself violates guard your life very much. In other words, when I curse myself, I could bring death to myself when I curse myself. So the Torah says, don't guard yourself, guard your life. So we see the Talmud interprets, the Gemara in Shavuos interprets the verse in Deuteronomy, guarding your life, to mean your life, not just guard your soul from bad thoughts or things like that. Okay. So we have two sources for the idea of guarding your life, one in Brachot, one in Shavuos. Now, what's the reason? Why should you put up a fence? So the Sefer Habatim, David Kochavi, he says as follows. He says, we got to be careful about anything dangerous. You don't want to drink water that's been sitting out for a long time. Maybe there are poisonous bugs or snake venom. You don't want to drink from the rivers at night when there could be poisonous things in there. Other waters that could be bad water. It shows how wonderful and perfect the Torah is. The Sidur of Tikkun HaYishuv, with Tikkun Olam, fixing the inhabitable world, fixing society and the conduct of a person for his body and his soul. The Torah is not only interested in our soul, but in our body as well, to help us and protect us. So that's why we have a fence. So it's not just about me or about the guy who falls off. It's about my society. According to the Sefer Habatim, it's a little broader. It's for society. We should bring into this family of verses another verse. You should live by them. The Torah says in Leviticus, you should keep the mitzvot, guard the mitzvot, which you do, and live by. And the rabbis say you should live by it, Gemara and Yuma, Talmud, but don't die by them. Don't die for the mitzvot. So if someone says, eat that ham sandwich or I'll shoot you, you got to eat the ham sandwich. Unless he's a persecutor, he's trying to stop anybody from being Jewish. That's different. But in general, you live by the mitzvot, you don't die by them. So there's another idea of living by them. The whole purpose of the Torah is to live by it, not to come to death. So we need to bring that in as well. It is sort of connected. It's another piece of the puzzle. Now, what about a bracha? Should you make a bracha on the mitzvah of putting up a fence? Maybe some of you have a type of roof, you could put up a fence. Maybe you can make a bracha. It's wonderful. So the Rotzeach, one of the medieval Ashkenazic German rabbis, he says, look, if the Gentiles do, you can't make a bracha. What's a bracha? A bracha says, God made us special and holy with his mitzvot, and he commanded me to eat matzah. Nobody eats matzah. I eat matzah. Nobody shakes a lulav. I do. Nobody blows a shofar. I do. But if put a guard against danger, everybody has to guard against danger. So it's not special. However, the Rambam says, look, there's some things you don't have to build a house, and you don't have to have a flat roof, and you don't have to put up a fence if you don't have a house. But if you do, you should make a bracha. It requires a blessing. So he does have a bracha for it. The Hayay Adam says that, we should make sure you put up a fence and things like that, any sort of danger. He says, can't make a bracha on that. He says, when you put up a fence, you can make a bracha, because that's a particular action. But just to prevent things that are dangerous, that's just avoiding putting blood in your house. So you don't make a bracha on a negative fulfillment of a negative commandment. So we don't make a bracha for that. Although there is a story of a Hasidic Rabbi who, in his later years, the doctor told me he couldn't eat the maror. It was too bitter. So he felt bad, and the students were wondering, is the rabbi going to listen to the doctor? So he picks up the maror, and this Hasidim thinks he's going to eat it. The old rabbi, 90 years old, he's going to eat the maror. So he takes it and he says, he makes a bracha, or something like that, that he made a bracha to protect his soul. He's going to get a mitzvah, and then he put it down. His mitzvah was not to eat the maror. The mitzvah was not to eat the maror. The mitzvah was to not eat the maror. That was his mitzvah. But generally, we don't make such a bracha because it's about the negative. It's about not putting blood on our situation. Okay. What is the mitzvah? So when different rabbis define the mitzvah, some people say it's a mitzvah to put up a fence. Okay, so I'll make a bracha on the fence. But the Rabbeinu Yerucham says, no, it's a mitzvah to put a makkah so that no one should fall off. In other words, it's not just an action, but the root of it is very important. It's really to protect from danger. Sefer HaChinuch says it's not a mitzvah to put up a fence. It's a mitzvah to remove obstacles and plagues from our neighborhood. It's about our neighborhood. It's about our home. It's about our environment. It's about our country. We want to remove obstacles. That's what it's about. It's not an action done by me. It's more of creating an environment to remove certain obstacles. The Rambam also says God warned us from not putting obstacles and snares in our home, in our land, and in our homes. He thinks it has to do with land. He puts in the word land. Very interesting. So people should not die. So it's all about not dying. It's not just about, you see, we might say nobody is going to die, right? You can have 100 people at your service, and they could all sit next to each other, and maybe nobody dies. But the goal is not just that nobody dies. The goal is that you prevented any danger that could happen. And that's why I'm so careful about the COVID virus. We want to prevent any obstacle that could happen. It's not about a particular danger. Nobody's dying. We have to prevent any sort of obstacle right? How far do you take it? That's it. You can ask your doctor and your rabbi exactly how far you take that. But we want to remove the obstacles. That's what it's about. It's about removing any possibility of an obstacle. It's about safety precautions. It's not about actually saving a life. Although the Rambam says, so no one should die. So maybe he thinks it's not just about precautions, it's actually about someone actually dying. Maybe it's like, don't stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. Or is it more like, no one should fall off? Is it about taking away obstacles? Or is it specifically about saving a life, like don't stand idly by the blood of your neighbor? So it's an interesting question. Is it more like guard your life, don't do anything dangerous, or vaguely so? Or is it more about not standing idly by the blood of your neighbor? Now, what are the mitzvot in this realm? And I left one out, so I'm going to change that for a second. We left out one. You should live by them. By the mitzvot. So we've got all these laws. We've got make a fence. That is an active thing. You've got to make a fence, a specific action. Do not place obstacle. Do not place blood in your home. That's a proactive thing. Do not put an obstacle. Do not put blood in your home. It's a negative commandment, and you have to be proactive not to put blood in your home. Don't stand idly by, is to be active in the time of the crisis. Guard your life very much, is don't even do things which could be dangerous. In front of the blind, don't put obstacles, don't cause harm, even indirect harm. And you should live by them. That's the general principle that all the mitzvot are about life. It's not about that. So what is the nature of the mitzvah of makeh, the mitzvah of safety? Is it to make a safe community? It's not about saving anybody's life. I don't know if we'll ever save someone's life because we made the fence this tall instead of a shorter fence. Maybe no one will ever die. No one ever would have died. But it's just about having a safe community, home, or land, or country. The other is no. It's about seeing actual danger. You want to foresee danger in the future. It's not about saving a life right now. It's about foreseeing danger that could possibly come. Or it's about don't be the guy who caused that guy to fall. If he falls off the roof, he was negligent. He should have looked more carefully. What is he, on drugs or something? What is he doing? But I don't want to be the guy. I don't want to be the guy who the absent-minded professor falls off. It's his fault, but I want to avoid guilt. It's a personal thing. I don't want to be responsible for death. So is it that you should be careful or that the home should be safe? Is it I should be careful? Guard your life very much. Or no, the house should be a safe house. Is it about the person or is it about the object? Is it about are we actually trying to save any lives here? Or are we just trying to be extra cautious or have a safe environment in general? So that's our discussion of the idea of safety in Judaism. And this time we'll open to further discussion. And we thank you for joining us here at the Anshei Sphard-Beth congregation for our discussion.